Our next speaker is Josh Rich. Josh is the Director of Field Training Services at G4S Secure Solutions USA, which is a leading provider of integrated security solutions in the U.S. with more than 45,000 employees across the country. G4S offers a unique combination of the security personnel, monitoring, tracking, and response technologies to provide users with customized security solutions uniquely tailored to meet their needs. In 2020, appointed to the G4S Global Inclusion Council as representative for the North American region, Josh managed field training services for G4S Secure Solution USA's training arm, the award-winning G4S North America Training Institute. Josh develops training programs, conducts training seminars, and writes and edits publications to support learning and development, while assessing training needs and developing customized curriculum to support national and local clients. Josh Rich is the creator of the Another Seat at the Table Diversity and Inclusion Program, which launched in July 2020. Since then, the program has gained so much traction and has been adapted for use by hundreds of facilitators across North America, Africa, Asia, and Europe, and I happen to be one of those, as well as Candace. For the past 10 years, it's been his passion to help provide others a seat at the table within various companies. Josh says diversity and inclusion is more important than ever. Please welcome Josh Rich as he speaks to us on why me, why us, why now.
Hi, Josh. We'd like to thank you so much for being here with us today. And I told you this before, but this summit wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for you. You inspired Tanya and I, and we appreciate all that you've done for us and all that you've taught us. And so I just have, this summit is about diversity and inclusion. So Josh, why diversity and inclusion, and why me?
Well, first off, Candace, thank you and Tanya for the opportunity to speak with you all about this important topic. I am just so honored to be here and just love the work that you all are doing. So thank you for this. In terms of why me and why diversity and inclusion, for me, I really think back about my family's history. And as I think back about my family's history, ladies, I think about my great-grandfather. And as I've gotten older, I've learned more about him. Quite frankly, when I was younger, I didn't even know to ask some of these questions that are now percolating through my mind and so forth. But what I realized about my great-grandfather is that he was born in 1889, okay? Born in 1889 in Washington, D.C., to Cyrus and Sally, who were former slaves, okay? And so my great-grandfather, was born at a time in this country was pivotal. A few years later, or a few decades later, he ended up fighting in World War I. And as he fought in the U.S. Army during World War I, he was fighting when a lot of the rights and freedoms that we, in some ways, may take for granted today weren't really available to him as a Black man in the United States, but he still was willing to fight and he still fought for that ideal. And many of the laws that we see that are really driving diversity and inclusion efforts were passed in the 1960s, but my grandfather, he didn't have the benefit of those back, or my great-grandfather didn't have the benefit of those back when he was fighting in World War I and so forth. And so as I think about that, I say, well, if my grandfather was able to do his part to help bring things along, to help make society, better, in that sense, then what can I do with everything that we have going on today, with the technology that's available to us today? Even how we're speaking right now is something that, this was only imagined years ago, right? But we have the opportunity to be able to do so, at this time. And so that's why I believe, why me, as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion in this important topic.
Well, Josh, as Candace said earlier, we're so thankful for everything that we have learned from you. And that brings us to our next question. I know that I love what you share with your story there about why you. What was it and what continues to be the inspiration behind the work that you're doing? That was not where you wanted to do this just for you, but you wanted to inspire others. And now it's why us? And that's our question for you. Why us now?
Right. Well, I I think there's a saying that, if you want to go, and I may mess this up a little, if you want to go, a little bit, then, go by yourself, right? If you want to go with others, then you could go, much further, in that sense. And, I think as it relates to why us, we can accomplish so much more when we're working together as a group. We have a commonality, but I think that one of the things that's missing right now is, quite frankly, how do we move beyond just having conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? How do we go beyond that? And how do we create action? Well, if I think back to, again, my family, my grandmother would tell me, and mother also reminded me of this as well, that you have two ears and one mouth for a reason, right? We need to listen, and we need to listen to each other, because if we listen and we respect, the opinions and the experiences of each other, then I believe that we can have a more inclusive, not just work environment, but we have a more inclusive society. And so, along those lines, we have the opportunity right now to really make things better. I mean, what generation, what family member wants to, make the next generation live in a society that was worse off than one that they had? I think for all of us, we are striving to make lives better, for our children and those generations to come. But that can't happen if I'm only working by myself. If I'm, quote unquote, only playing with, my toys on my own, and I'm not willing to, share those things so that we can create a larger, whatever it is that we're building, then it's not going to be helpful. So I think that we need to have everyone having a voice. And by giving people a voice, we're able to learn from each other. And I think we can treat each other with dignity and respect. I don't think that's too much to ask. And so I think that's a big reason as to why I would say, why us and why that's important right now.
Josh, that's wonderful. And I just have to say, I was sitting here taking a quick little notes as you were talking, because as much as I listen to you and as much as I've learned through all of our trainings, there's always something more. And you've really brought about an incredible training, and we appreciate it so much. And since you started this, I know that this was a work that started sometime back, but last summer, with a lot of things that happened in our world, it came to the forefront. And that's whenever you really started saying, it's not just me, it's not just us, but it's something has to be done.
Right.
So let me ask you this question. Why now? Why is this so important for us? Because this problem has been around for a long time, but something had to be done. And you're stepping up to really bring about some positive change, things that take action. So why is it so important now more than ever?
Well, I think that's a twofold answer. And thank you, for, that feedback. I'm happy that you've gotten something, that both of you have gotten something from the program and so forth. But, in terms of why now, you mentioned it last summer. It was really just all of these different things coming together, at once. We had the health pandemic, which in many ways caused people to shift to being isolated. So you have that form of, isolation. People weren't sure when we would be able to return back, and in many instances, to the workplace. If you were working in a corporate environment, you may have been working remotely. And so a lot of changes had to happen in a short period of time. But as a result of that, not only were people home, but people were watching TV a little bit more, probably a little bit more in tune to the things that were happening. Also, I would just, put out here as a reminder that we also saw that sports, something that I love to watch, something that, back in the day, I used to love to do, right? But those things were not being played quite the same way, because the world was really grappling with how do we really get a handle on this health pandemic with COVID-19. And so people were looking at the news a little bit more, and there was a story that came along that I think really altered this whole conversation. And that was, unfortunately, George Floyd being killed. And so a lot of companies, when this happened, because we watched this man's life literally pass on video, right? So many people, it didn't matter which ethnicity or where you were in the world. I mean, people were able to see this video and they said, wow, something needs to happen. And so, I was hearing a lot of statements that were being put out by companies saying that they don't support that type of, action and so forth, but more specifically, they support, Black lives. And we saw all of these things happening. And while that's good for people to come out in support of and say, look, we can do better than what it is that we've seen here, that should not have happened. Where's the action? Because people are experiencing what we would call microaggressions and so forth like that in the workplace that makes it more difficult for people to really bring their quote unquote full selves to work and to really be able to give their perspective and so forth like that. And so, as I observed this and saw this like everybody else, I said, well, how do we make a difference? And so that's when this program really came about, so that we can help bring awareness, but more importantly, help move people to action as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so right now, on a I guess a lighter note, so to speak, when you think about this, many business leaders and policymakers, they're going to say, okay, well, it's good to do something that is positive, but truly, what about the cost? Or what about the benefits that's associated with being able to do this? And fortunately, as I researched this more, I was able to find a study by a well-known company, consulting firm and so forth by the name of Accenture. A lot of people have heard of Accenture, but Accenture did a study where they interviewed hundreds of executives and leaders of various companies, and they asked them, how diverse, how inclusive is their particular company? And what they found was that the majority of those leaders, pretty much 98% of those leaders, they said that their companies were in fact inclusive. That was their perspective. But then they also, Accenture being, also spoke to the rank and file personnel within those organizations. And they asked them that same question. And there was a what? A perception gap between what it is that the executives and those senior leaders were saying in terms of how inclusive their company were or was, versus what it is that the rank and file employees felt. And those rank and file employees, it was a 20% difference. They felt that the companies weren't as inclusive as those executives believed, and that as those executives had actually answered. And so you may think, okay, well, 20% difference, okay, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal that Accenture found was that that was a $1 trillion gap that we were looking at there as a result of those companies not being more diverse and inclusive. And so for anyone that's listening right now, if you're wondering, well, is there a case study that we can point to say that, yes, it makes not just, ethical sense to be more inclusive of everyone, but it's dollars that are made there in that same sense, then you can look at this study and others that have been done, for that. So collectively, I think that is why now, okay, if we continue without making these adjustments that I believe that, Candace, Tanya, that we're capable of collectively making, along with everyone else that is joining us right now, if we start making those adjustments today, then we can start to benefit as a society from closing that perception gap. But if we wait, I believe, unfortunately, it's only going to get bigger. And we're going to be missing out on jobs and innovation that is available for us if we lean in together versus trying to do things separately.
Josh, so what can I do to make a difference now? What can I do? What can we all do?
Great question. Great question. And I think that many times for folks, when you have a issue or obstacle that may seem so big, we get what is called paralysis through analysis, okay? And that's because we just don't know where to start. But I think that we can really simplify that. And I appreciate that question, Candace. I think we can really simplify that by doing what it is that we're doing right now, starting where we are. Have a conversation with those in your sphere of influence, your family, your friends, even your neighbors, right? If we have these types of discussions, then we can make a difference. because we're able to question maybe some of those previously held beliefs, stereotypes, biases, all of those things. If we can just pause for a moment and say, well, look, I know that these are things that I've heard in the past, but is that really making it correct? Should I allow this to continue to be what's driving my mindset and how it is that I view other people? Or is there a different way that I can look at this? And I think that we realize those differences when we're having these conversations. And quite frankly, if I could just add that when we're having conversations with people that don't necessarily have the same background as us, well, how do we know if they have the same background or not? We got to talk to folks, right? They may not look like us, so maybe they have a different ethnicity. They may have a different race from us. They may even be a different, gender, whatever it may be. But having conversations and not being judgmental, people are sharing their stories, I think that we're going to find that we have a lot more in common as people than we believe that we have different. And if we focus upon the common ground, then we see where there's synergy for us to be able to build and to be able to do things, quite frankly, in a more inclusive manner. Okay. I think in the workplace, and I've heard this example as well. For leaders in the workplace, I think it is important that anytime you're having a meeting, here's something simple that can be done. Let's say that you're in a room of maybe 5 to 10 people, and you're getting ready to end that meeting. Instead of just ending the meeting, I think studies have shown us that most people or some people are not going to be able to, just readily give their answers. They may be a little shy. They may not feel like their opinion matters. How you help to bring everyone along is to say, for example, hey, we're not going to finish this meeting just yet. We want to make sure that we're not missing anything, right? Not missing any ideas for how we can improve some processes here or this objective that we're working towards. And so, Candace, before we're done, share with me anything that maybe you've thought of that we haven't mentioned, right? Then you go to the next person, Tanya, what are your thoughts on this? Do you have any other ideas that you believe would be beneficial? And if, as a leader, someone that's leading that conversation, you're able to go around that room to each person, and we can even do this virtually, right? In a Zoom session or what have you. But if you go around each room and you make it a habit to be able to really engage with every person, then that's going to allow people to feel more included. That's going to allow them to feel that they belong as a part of your team. And that helps to set a precedent. But if we're not doing these things and we're just giving the floor to the loudest speaking person in the room or the person that likes to speak a lot, okay, I think every company, every group has people that like to speak a lot, in that sense, and it's nothing wrong with that. But we can't allow that person, just because they are willing to speak, to drown out the voices of others that maybe are a little bit more hesitant to be able to lend, their voice to that conversation.
Josh, these are incredible lessons. And your advice there, wrap up a meeting. That is just wonderful advice. I'm just thinking how much that would change every organization if they just took that one tip and put it into place each day or at each meeting. Is there anything else you want to share with us before we wrap up today? I know that you have so many things that you're working on. I know a few of those you share with us we're excited about. But is there anything else that you would want to share today that we can take to start making a difference right away?
Sure. I think that as we're having this conversation, maybe for someone that's out there listening, and thank you for joining us. And I certainly hope that this has been beneficial for you. But as you're listening, I would just do a self-inventory, right? And, this isn't something that I would just say, you do once, every week or whatever like that. Literally every day as you're going through, think about, is there something different that you can do to be more inclusive, of others, right? And then also, if you see some progress that's being made in the workplace, don't get complacent about that, okay? I think that it's good to have measurables for how we can make progress as relates to diversity and inclusion. But just because you hit those quote unquote numbers, whatever they may be, That doesn't mean that we have to stop there, right? We could continue to, exceed, those goals and so forth. And I think that the results will only speak for themselves in the sense that they will be positive. Now, there's some things that we can do to help structure diversity and inclusion programs, certainly. But I think if each of us use the filter of, am I treating this person in the way that I would want to be treated? Am I being respectful as I'm communicating with my coworker right now? Am am I actually, treating this person with dignity? Okay, maybe I agree with something that they did, but does that give me license to potentially tear down that person or speak to them in a way that may be demeaning, right, in front of the rest of the team? Or should I ever do something like that? If those are the types of things that are happening, then maybe we're being insensitive. Well, I would argue and say that we're being insensitive to the fact that not only do we work, but as people, we have all types of issues that are happening in our lives, especially with everything that's going on right now. Are we really asking the question, to our team members, are you okay? Are we taking the time to ask the question, are you okay? Is there something that I can help with? Many companies are going to have resources that are available to the different employees. And if the companies don't have it, then maybe there are, nonprofit resources that may be available that can assist. But us taking that extra step of fighting complacency and looking at how we can help to solve maybe some of the issues that our teammates are having, I think that that can really help a lot of people. So if there were one thing I would just use as a takeaway there, I would say fight the complacency and ask people. Well, these are actually two things, but fight the complacency, ask people if they're okay.
We can't assume that just someone else is doing this. So you might be the only person to ask someone, are you okay today?
Mhm.
And that can change a person's life.
That's it. That's it. That's an excellent point. Totally agreed. And just that one moment of asking that question, and as you say that, Candace, I think it's important to note, as people, we have a tendency, especially in U.S. culture, we'll say, "How's it going?" Right? Or "How are you?" And people say, "Oh, I'm fine." Right? But if we're asking that of a person, I think we should really take the time to say, no, really, how's it going? Maybe you've noticed something that was different with that individual, and you don't have to press to get into their personal life, so to speak, but just saying, no, I was really asking, are you okay? I think that can make a world of a difference, for that person because they feel like somebody sees them, right? And that they matter, in that sense. So yes, awesome point, Candace. And yes, let's not make those assumptions that other people are asking that question.
And I love what you said about finding common ground, because I think all three of us are very different people and we're from all over the United States, but we do all have multiple things in common, including sports, Josh. Even though we disagree about teams, we can all still get along, right? So it just
Absolutely.
goes to show that we can have different viewpoints and still we can all come together and make a difference.
Agreed. Agreed. And that's okay. If I could, I'll just add one other point, but that is genetically. I've been looking at studies about this, but genetically, our DNA is 99% the same. So if you think about that, why do we focus so much on that 1% difference or that 0.1%, difference there? We shouldn't do that. We should really find that common ground, as you were just pointing out, and just really appreciate the fact that we're all a part of the human race.
We do. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here. I know all of our attendees they're probably taking notes. I know they're taking notes. If not, you should be taking notes, because Josh, every time you start speaking, you spill nuggets of gold and things that really I can take away whenever we finish our call, when we finish this summit. I know that there's things that you said today. I will handle my meetings differently in the future, because a lot of times we feel like we've wrapped it up and people may be kind of quiet sitting there, but you're right. They may need someone just to say, is there anything else? And when you ask them, they know that they're important. And that was so powerful today. And I thank you so much for being here and taking your time. And our attendees are going to grow so much from the wisdom that you shared.
Thank you. And thank you all for having me. And I'm very grateful.